welcome you today. I'm gonna, before I pass it off to our formal welcomer for the morning, I'm gonna just briefly introduce myself for those that don't know me. I'm Jill Jolliker. I'm the Assistant County Administrator for Douglas County / e-community coordinator. That's the entrepreneurship community that supports Douglas County. You're going to hear from my counterpart, Ryan Rains from the Lawrence Metro program and the Lawrence Chamber in just a couple minutes. Thank you for putting up with all my emails that I sent to you, but I have a lot of enthusiasm for this topic that we're going to talk about today, and I truly think that we have some really notable local and national partners with us today that I feel incredibly grateful to have with us for today's conversation. And I hope this sparks ideas and enthusiasm from you all that you'll share with Ryan and I after today's conversation. So with that, I'm going to, you see the agenda, it's up on the screen, and I'm going to go back to the video panel so you can see all of our Hollywood squares of my panelists, and I'm going to hand it off for our formal welcome to my friend Shelly Pash with Network Kansas.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Jill, and thanks for putting this together. Couldn't be happier with this, and I'm glad to be a connector for sure. You and Ryan have been doing incredible jobs, and Ryan, I know you're new to the party, and you've been stepping up and kicking booty, so we appreciate it. Jill has just been kicking booty right along. So I am Shelly Pash, manager of rural entrepreneurship for Network Kansas. And I've been in the field of ecosystem building, entrepreneurship, economic development for 14 years. And, you know, earlier this week or last week, there was a newsletter that came out from the Kauffman Foundation. And Wendy Gillis is the president and CEO. And I'm going to paraphrase her a little bit, where she had stated, we continue to push for changes needed to dismantle the broken systems and inequity that hold too many back. And this is where we are in Douglas County. And we're fortunate to have the leads, like I had said, Jill Jolliker from Douglas County and Ryan Rains from Lawrence Metro to discuss a little more equitable opportunities for every entrepreneur and how we can all play a responsible role. We'll also welcome Faye Horwit, President and CEO of Forward Cities, Nick Gunkel, also with Forward Cities, Vice President of Ecosystem Impacts. And they'll demonstrate what we can do about the equitable opportunities that are out there. And our very own Gabe Munoz, he's the local director for eShip Kansas City with Forward Cities, and he's going to illustrate the work in our neighboring Kansas City region. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for inviting me to be part of your panel. And Jill, you can take it away.
Well, I'm going to hand it off to my friend Ryan to kind of frame up the why we're all here and why we want to have this conversation. So I'll hand it off to Ryan. Introduce yourself and tell us why we're here today.
Hi, my name is Ryan Rains. I work for the Chamber of Commerce in Lawrence, Kansas. At the Chamber, we are responsible for an e-community through our partnership with Network Kansas, which has been a fantastic partnership. And as Shelly said, if you don't know, I joined the Chamber's team in March, so coming up on 11 months, and it's been a great experience. One of the things that Jill and I, with Jill's Douglas County e-community, one of the things that we quickly recognize is that there is opportunity within our ecosystem to advance I think the next step, if that makes sense, for different participants in our community. And so our goal is, which sounds lofty, I'm sure, but thinking about the kindergartner or the first grader who's out on the playground and thinks about having their own company or wanting to own their own playground company or whatever it is, to the adult who's retired and is thinking about starting a company here in Lawrence. Maybe they've retired from somewhere else and they moved to Lawrence and they're thinking about starting and doing something else. Wherever anywhere in between, trying to make a clear next step for that individual, whether they have an interest in entrepreneurship or whether they are an entrepreneur and are trying to find more resources to find success. And so our goal is to work to remove any obstacles that stand in the way through partnerships and creativity. And we're not going to do it alone. And so I'm super thankful to have a great team to work with, and excited about sort of some of the bricks that we can lay now to support future development, and really to build on an entrepreneurial spirit in a lot of ways that already exists here. And it's a great resource for us in Lawrence and Douglas County.
Thanks, Ryan. And the last thing I'll add before I hand it off to Faye with Forward Cities is I see many of my colleagues from the e-community group, but I also see a lot of folks, and there's overlap there between folks that have been heavily invested in the community health plan, and specifically the anti-poverty community health plan. I want you all to know that the initial version, our draft plan for the anti-poverty group was a part of the planning for this agenda today. And I've shared that with Faye and Nick and Gabe. And so I really think that they have a good understanding of what's driving this conversation. It's not just, Ryan and I, when we first started talking about this, it was, how do we get more loans out to our communities, to entrepreneurs? What dots aren't getting connected? It's bigger than that. And the community, if you've been invested in the community health plan, the work of the anti-poverty community health plan is how do we engage in intentional community wealth building, and how do we talk about some systemic barriers that organizations like mine and Ryan's and Network Kansas and each of you can play in addressing those barriers. I know it's not going to be easy. None of us know it's going to be easy, but I think what you're going to hear today is that it's accomplishable. Forward Cities is doing that work. Gabe is doing it not far from us. And I love looking at what our neighboring communities are doing, because I think it's incredibly relevant. And I think it can inspire a lot of us to, and that's what I hope we can do today, is get inspired. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Faye Horwit with Forward Cities, and let her share some of the work that they're doing and inspire us.
Thank you so much, Jill. And I'm really grateful to be here with y'all today. And I'm glad that Forward Cities team gets a chance to spend some time, at least virtually in Douglas County. So thank you for the invitation. Would love to go ahead and just dig in and talk about, ideally, this time we'll have together today is focused on you. We'd like to be able to help you all understand what this work is looking like around the country. So we'll start by giving you a little bit of information about us. Then we want to find out who you are. That's always important as individuals. We'll share a little bit about the concepts of ecosystem building and equity and entrepreneurship. We'll share a couple of frameworks and tools that we are using to support this work, and that's our E3 scorecard and our Abide anti-racism framework for communities. And then we'll share and hear from Gabe as he's sort of putting this work into action in communities. And so hopefully by the end of our time together, you will walk away with some deep understanding of how you can advance equity and entrepreneurship for Douglas County in some real meaningful ways. So as Jill shared, my name is Faye Horwit. I'm the president and CEO of Forward Cities. I guide our programmatic strategy. On with us is Nick Gunkel, who's our senior vice president. And then excited to have the real superstar of this work is Gabe. And he's the person that actually, in one of our many communities, and in this case, in the greater Kansas City area, really puts this work into practice in local community. So would love to start off by finding out who you are. If you can just drop in the chat real quick, what is your name, your pronouns, and your organization, just so I get a sense of who is here and your roles in the local community. That would be fantastic. And then I'll go ahead and hop forward as you're doing that as well. Great. And yeah, I know who you are. And glad for it. Thanks. It looks like we have another Douglas County representative. All right. Entrepreneur, insurance agent. I love it. Karwu artist helping the homeless. That is fabulous. I would love to hear more about that work offline. Hopefully we can get to that. Great Business Development Center, childcare aware of, fantastic nonprofit folks in the room, county commissioner, I love it. And you continue to drop that in. I'll continue to peek there. Community foundation, so we got philanthropy in the room. Love it. Thank you all for being here with us today. And you'll hear a little bit later why it's important that all of you in your unique roles in community are a part of this conversation. That said, we'll go ahead and hop forward and tell you a little bit about who we are. So Forward Cities was founded in 2014, and we are a national nonprofit that is focused on equipping community leaders with strategies and tools to grow and sustain equitable investment in entrepreneurship and the support networks that they need to survive. We work across the country, and I will give you a heads up. Our work is growing so fast that this map is actually not representative of all the places that we're currently working. But we have worked in Indianapolis and Franklin County most recently. We're currently working in Pittsburgh and Westmoreland County and Jeanette in Pennsylvania. We do some work with Dallas, Texas, and we're expanding our work to include most recently Chula Vista, Greensboro, and Wilmington. We also work across a network of communities in a learning network in Ohio, Akron, Canton, Dayton, Toledo, and Youngstown. And this list is growing every day because more and more communities are seeing the need to bring in, sort of expert help to support. What does this look like? Because this is new and emergent sort of, work related to ecosystem building. So we also have the pleasure of having been tapped by the Ewing, Marion Kauffman Foundation, who has been the organization, the foundation in the country that is leading the way for this emerging field of ecosystem. And they tapped us because of the work that we do to lead their eShip Communities program. That's a community-driven approach for entrepreneurial ecosystems focused on inclusion, relationships, and social capital, which is the heart of ecosystem building. And as a part of that work, we also are working in Baltimore, Kansas City, Long Beach, and a region in New Mexico that they self-named Rio Grande, that council. And that is Santa Fe, Albuquerque, and surrounding areas. So what is it that we are doing and what are we headed towards? The idea, the ultimate vision is, we call it E3, and that is equity for every entrepreneur. But what does that mean? It means that every entrepreneur has equitable opportunity and access to develop, launch, and grow a business that creates wealth for themselves, their family, and/or their community. And that means that, and that equitable word is the most important part. So what does equity mean? So equity actually has two different meanings. We know that equity means both the quality of being fair or impartial, and it also can mean something very different, which is ownership, especially as considered as the right to share in future profits or value of a thing. And that is most commonly associated with business or home ownership. So we believe in and strive to enable both sides of the word equity, and we advocate for equitable investment in entrepreneurs within an ecosystem. And that also means when you invest, what happens? Ideally, there are returns. And so we like to think about this idea that everyone that invests in a local ecosystem also has an opportunity to see returns on what that looks like. And it looks different for different types of investors. So for those of you that are new to ecosystem building, we thought it was important to give a framework related to just what it is, because this is a question we get asked a lot. It's a wonky word. It has its roots in nature. But it's essentially in nature, it means the supporting environment. So all of the living entities in an environment and that the environment that exists to support them. So when we think about entrepreneurship, an ecosystem is the businesses and the various assets that add to their long-term impact and net worth, as well as the connections between them. And in order to be successful, and this is the equation that we think about, is that communities must invest in all three of these core categories. And that is, they have to invest in entrepreneurs. So you have to make sure that your entrepreneurs and businesses are well funded and they are equitably funded. You also have to make sure that that there are people, there are equippers, that there are organizations and individuals and B2B companies that are well positioned and equitably funded to support entrepreneurs. And then the magic, I believe, happens, we believe happens in the middle of those two things. And that is lifting up one layer above and seeing the whole ecosystem. And that is the connectivity, both between entrepreneurs and their equippers, and between equippers and each other. So being able to lift up beyond your organization and your needs of your organization and your mission, and to see what's best for every entrepreneur and for the entire economy in Douglas County. So that is our this is where E3 comes from for us. And so then the question is, who, if investment is the key, who should be investing in Douglas County's entrepreneurs? And my answer to that is everyone. And that's why I'm glad to see so many of you here on the call that represent different parts of community, because out of every 1,000 people in a community, only 3 will start a business. And so that means that, does that mean that that other 997 has nothing to do with the support of the success of those businesses? Absolutely not. It means that each of those 997 people, regardless of who they are, and because of who they are, have the ability to invest in supporting the long-term survival of businesses, every business in their community. And so this is the way we like to see it, is all kinds of different capital that's being poured into the success of these business owners. From the entrepreneurs themselves, so hire their intellectual capital, and how are they supporting one another in this work as well, which often happens. The consumers and the procurement officers that are making choices about how to spend their money, keeping that money local. The social capital of mentors and champions that are there every day to make sure that businesses have that sort of one-on-one support. The knowledge capital of the service providers and the support organizations to provide that education for how you launch and grow a business. The institutional capital of anchor institutions like hospitals and our real estate investors as well, of like, what is your role? How can you have more entrepreneur-friendly policies and engagement to make sure that you're supporting local businesses? And then the meaty ones, the ones that you tend to think about supporting entrepreneurs more so, are related to the investment capital. So venture capitalists and angel investors that are directly supporting entrepreneurs. And then you start to get a little deeper, right? What is the political capital that requires? You have to have policies, entrepreneur-friendly policies and supports to make sure that that you're removing barriers and bureaucracy for entrepreneurs to thrive. Corporations and financial institutions also have a role to play in this by sponsoring the ecosystem level work and making sure that they are providing local grant opportunities for ecosystem level work. And then also this financial capital model. So these last two, corporate and financial, these are the pieces that we see are really necessary for funding that ecosystem level part of the work. Is you have to have some catalytic funding to get this flywheel going. And foundations, community foundations, are best suited to provide that, because they are really in it for the ultimate long-term goal, which ecosystem building is as well. And that is ultimately going to create economic wealth for the community. And they also have the ability to sort of catalyze endowment and sort of ongoing sustaining funding for ecosystem level work. Same thing for impact investors. So if anyone asks you, hey, how do I invest in local businesses? There are all of these different ways, and it doesn't have to always have to do with the money that you have. All right, so for those of you that, now we've talked about ecosystem, what do ecosystems mean? Now, what does it mean to build ecosystems? What is ecosystem building look like. And so we'll share this great video that the Kauffman Foundation produced this past year to sort of give a framework between what it means to build healthy and equitable ecosystems.
An entrepreneurial ecosystem is all of the resources that surround entrepreneurs as they move their business forward. Ecosystem building is about getting those resources and folks in the community to work together by creating an environment of trust and collaboration, supporting big ideas, supporting people when they take risks, supporting people when they fail, creating that right culture that is ripe for entrepreneurial success. Because of the changing nature of our economy and our communities, we have to take new approaches in ways that will make sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate. Traditional ways of supporting entrepreneurs looked at the individual parts of an ecosystem. Ecosystem builders take a systems view. They put entrepreneurs front and center in that system, and they say, how can I make our community more supportive of entrepreneurs of all types? So the role of an ecosystem builder is really a systems leader. It really takes leaders stepping up who care about the whole system and not just the individual parts of the ecosystem. Entrepreneurial ecosystem builders come from economic development, community development, libraries, universities. They come from different sectors. They could be entrepreneurs themselves. Anyone who cares about the success of entrepreneurs in their community. The challenge is that there's thousands of people that are working on building their entrepreneurial ecosystem, but they were doing it what I would call custom and bespoke ways. There's very little consensus on some basic elements. How do we create the environment in which entrepreneurs in our community can thrive? What are the processes? What are the steps? How do you build an ecosystem? How do you measure the health of an ecosystem? And I think as that practice of ecosystem building matures, it becomes more available to more communities. The only way we're going to figure out how to do this is to figure it out together.
All right, so we love our friends at the Kauffman Foundation. They always have these beautiful animations and do a really great job of explaining things so that everyone can understand them. So great to have that sort of broad overview. And it takes us back to this idea of the social capital and all those different parts and pieces that I shared of how different people can really lean into supporting and investing in the ecosystem. So that said, the title, and the focus of this work today is about equity. And so before we talk about, what equity can look like, it's important to think about the opposite. How do you recognize inequity in your ecosystem so that you know what it is that you need to work on? And so sharing a few stats that really kind of bring that home. Let's see here. So this is the big one. I love starting out with this one because it kind of is shocking. You may know this. Some of you may know this, some may not. 1% of venture capital funding goes to Black and Latinx entrepreneurs. That is not 10, that is 1, which is pretty significant. And this is not new, this is persistent. Another stat, 51% of Black workers are self-employed business owners compared with 11.1% of white workers. And that means this idea that for businesses that are, if you have a job, right, that you are only employing yourself, right? And so this idea of 11.1% of white workers are self-employed. It's very, very different, right? Next, 83% of Paycheck Protection Program loans, we know, we just experienced this last year, were awarded to white-owned businesses. And so businesses that were already disadvantaged, are mostly Black and brown businesses and women-owned businesses, were already behind. But then when pandemic hit, because they're primarily focused on retail and service-oriented businesses, or tend to have more of a majority, they were the hardest hit by the pandemic, first of all. And then when there was relief offered, those businesses actually were the ones that were less able to take advantage of them because the loans were not actually offered related to sector. And so what you saw is a huge disparity of really re-traumatization of organizations and businesses that were already hurting. And then the last one, which is I think can be, or is most definitely a misunderstood stat. And that is this one, 163%, there's been 163% increase in the number of businesses started by Black and Latino women since 2007. Now, on the surface, when you look at that stat, it's like, woohoo, that is fabulous. Love this. But the reality is that this is why the stat is the most compelling to me, is the reason why this exists is because of the tremendous wage gap for Black and Latino women in our country. And what that means is that while they have the same jobs, they get paid somewhere between 60 to 50% on the dollar white males, which means that they can't support themselves and their families, and they have to actually start businesses as a way to supplement their existing income. And so this is entrepreneurship in many ways by necessity, not by choice. And so that, but if you flip that, what you find is actually Black and Latino women, particularly Black women, have a higher success rate of actually turning around an investment in a business into profit and revenue. So the realities of the data don't match what is happening in systemic issues in our country. And that's because history, this is something, it's a great quote by a colleague of ours. And this is the idea that history doesn't repeat itself, systems do. And so when we look at the history of Black and brown people in this nation, and the history of colonialism in this country, and discrimination and structural racism, this is where we are. We've gotten to where we are because of our history. And so we can't change the dynamic and the outcomes for the folks that I've just shared with you until we change the systems themselves. We can't do it in one-offs. We can't do it one entrepreneur at a time. We have to take a look at the root causes of how the system's designed and redesign them. So when we think about ecosystems, there are three things that tend to be major hindrances for entrepreneurs and underestimated and underinvested entrepreneurs. The first is bias. I think of these as the 3 Bs: bias, barriers, and bureaucracy. The first one is more liquid because it's really hard for people to know and understand their own biases. But this refers to the systematic deviation from rational choice. We just talked about this. Black women actually do better with investment funding, but they receive the least amount of funding. And that's because of this bias. There's something internal that has grown in us as a country that attributes certain elements of success to certain types of people that look a certain way. The second is barriers. And these are obstacles, both, that span from emotional, cultural, financial, or physical, also from the experiences and the education that we get. These things that prevent or limit participation and access in equitably in entrepreneurial opportunity. And then the last one is bureaucracy. And these are the things that we've seen in the pandemic that we just talked about, is that these are processes and systems that are put in place, and many of them actually to do exactly what they are doing. And that is to prevent certain people from participating or having opportunities. And that is what we call structural racism. This idea that it's not by accident, but these are things that actually have perpetuated over time. Redlining is an example of a practice, a bureaucratic practice that was put in place on purpose to achieve a certain goal. And so while there are some bureaucratic elements that are on purpose, but there are also some that happen that people are not aware of the limitations they can create. But these are the 3 core categories that we tend to find for inequities that exist within an ecosystem that you have to keep your eye on. So when you recognize them, what can you do about it? And so a lot of people try their best to create solutions. And there's a lot of talk about inclusive innovation and inclusive ecosystems, inclusive entrepreneurship. And And one of the things that Forward Cities has emerged, and what we realize is that it's not enough to be inclusive. Inclusion actually puts it still in the lens of the people that are doing the excluding in the first place. So it's basically saying, give me permission to participate. You are giving me permission, and we need to flip that script, because if you're relying on the people who created the broken system in the first place to provide you access and to let you have something, which is the way inclusion is often framed, then we're never going to get anywhere. We're not going to have that systems level change. So Forward Cities has developed a framework that we believe actually more approximates the way we should be thinking about this. And it's called ABIDE, an acronym that we've developed that focuses on an anti-racism framework for entrepreneurial ecosystems. And so just ask you a few questions to think about when you're trying to develop solutions for your ecosystem to address these issues. Here's some things you can ask yourself to see if it's actually hitting the mark. Access. Is the opportunity reasonably within reach? And that means, time of day that is offered, the location, is there public transportation to it? Is it accessible in language? Is the actual words, are they too high a level or too wonky for people to understand? The next is belonging. Does your solution resonate with a variety of cultures and lifestyles? So it's not enough to say everyone is welcome, because of course everybody thinks everybody is welcome, right? Nobody wants to not be welcoming, at least most people. But if I show up in your space, have you considered me and my unique culture and my unique needs in the way you have set up the space, the way you've decorated it, the way you engage in that space, or am I just an extra? Do I have a sense of belonging? The next is inclusion. Are multiple perspectives integrated in leadership, in the design, implementation, and promotion of what you are doing? So this is how you take that word inclusion and inclusive and actually deepen the meaning. It's not just about presence. It's actually much deeper than that. And that is about how you're shaping what you do and who is out front and who is making those decisions. The next is diversity. Is there an intentional openness and outreach to all? And that does not mean just putting some Black and brown people on your website graphics. That is not going to do it, particularly if it's clip art. So you actually have to make an intentional effort to reach out to folks and to engage the leaders who are already actively and well serving these communities. And you actually have to invest in them. And so rather than saying, hey, come teach a course at my space, because I want your Black audience, you actually say, you know what, how can we fund you in your neighborhood to do the work that you are doing for an audience that you already know and understand? So that's part of what that can look like. And then the last one is equity. Are there compensatory considerations to address historical and systemic oppression? And that has to do with funding levels for this work and for organizations. So rather than continuing to perpetuate funding disparities and giving funding to large organizations and institutions that have the back end and know how to write grants and check all the boxes and do all the stuff, investing in more grassroots organizations that may not know those things yet, but how can you help build capacity for them to get better at that? And how can you maybe incubate a grassroots organization or a Black or brown-led organization to help them grow their chops to be able to lean into this work? And then lastly, are you thinking about COVID-19 and factoring that into your work? How does the pandemic and its effects exacerbate existing biases, barriers, and bureaucracy? So, that is sort of the way you can, this is a great tool that you can use to think about your current programming choices and if they align with this, to understand, are you really addressing systemic barriers in your community? And so if you've gotten to a place where you understand and recognizes what inequity looks like, how do you know when you are making a difference? How do you know when you're turning the tide? How do you know what levers to pull to make a difference? And with that, I'll turn it over to my fantastic colleague, Nick, who's going to share a little bit about a tool that we're developing to do just that.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Well, I hear me a bit on echo. I hope that's gone now. It's always difficult to follow Faye when she presents, because you get the monotone German following the kind of very inspiring African-American head of the organization, but I'll try my best. So I think one of the key things that we've been grappling with over the last 2.5, 3 years that we've been doing this work, and we're so fortunate to be invited to lots of communities to help them and their stakeholder groups expedite this work, is the question around measurement and evaluation. How do we know that we're on the right track if we started something? How can we connect our small individual steps towards a larger vision of what the ecosystem should become? And what are like points along that journey where we have an opportunity to course correct? It took us quite a while to abstract from individual program level evaluations to actually a framework that we can use at the beginning of conversations for communities that are really interested in taking a self-assessment or taking stock of where across all the different facets that make up the ecosystem they're currently standing, where they're doing well, whether they have areas to grow, and especially applying a strong equity lens to all of these different components that make up an ecosystem. So I think the E3 scorecard, the Equity for Every Entrepreneur scorecard, is our best attempt of bringing these ambitions together, recognizing that this is our best attempt. It's not the be-all, end-all solution, and it makes certain very intentional trade-offs, to which I'll come back over the course of the next couple of slides. But to orient you on the scorecard a bit, you mind going one step back for a second, sorry. Orient you just around the big categories that shape a scorecard. We're really focusing in on the people, folks like you, that are the lifeblood of an ecosystem. The programs, which are the most visible markers usually of services that are provided to entrepreneurs, both on the education side, on the technical assistance side, and then those programs that facilitate connection between entrepreneurs and those that support them. The network's more established kind of processes that provide support and allow support to be channeled to different stakeholders and especially business owners. And then the narratives that persist and the ways of thinking and looking at your own ecosystem. So for us, these are like the 4 different main facets, and we'll break them down further and operationalize this tool. What we hope to accomplish with the scorecard, and the scorecard comes in a kind of self-paced online tool that we invite you also later to take for yourselves, and encourage other folks on the call and outside the call to take with an eye towards how do you experience the entrepreneurial ecosystem, is designed to provide a general overview of what happens in your ecosystem and how do our individual efforts stack up on all the different bases that make up a well-functioning and thriving equitable entrepreneurial ecosystem. And through that process, we're spotlighting the areas that have proven to be well-functioning for everyone, well-functioning for a few, or simply non-existent. And then it gives us a roadmap, or at least it gives us some ideas about how we can take these individual results and package them, or package individual pilot programs around them. So if we see that we're excelling in two parts of our ecosystem, but we really need some support on the narratives front, how can we configure our assets that we have in order to bring them to action and advance our work on the narrative front? That requires alignment, and it requires the skillful kind of marrying in assets in order to make real progress on some of the areas for growth. I mentioned the couple trade-offs that we make with this tool, and just let me highlight two things. What this tool attempts to do, and I think it's unique in that way, it's to peel back the onion a bit and look underneath the very visible elements that folks readily can like recite as being core components of the ecosystem. It's the infrastructure that exists. It's the different organizations that provide services, and then go to the more tricky to operationalize and to measure components of an ecosystem that every one of you knows are key to making the entrepreneurs' lives and their navigation through the ecosystem possible, and are like the real necessity for making it a thriving ecosystem. And that's, what is their level of awareness, not just entrepreneurs' awarenesses of resources and networks that are out there, but also service providers' awareness about overlapping kind of offerings or blank spots that they collectively have. It touches on what is the connectivity, so it's one step beyond kind of awareness. So what is our communication and communication cadence that we have with one another? How do we bring awareness to bear in our day-to-day kind of actions by making intentional decisions to attend other people's kind of meetings, reach out to entrepreneurs that have no voice or we rarely listen to in making some of the larger ecosystem level decisions. And how does it impact the trust that we hold towards one another? It's like a really reciprocal concept of like, what is the trust from entrepreneurs towards us as entrepreneurial support providers or entrepreneurial champions, or how do we trust them to represent their needs in a forum where they actually can make change? And that's a good example. We'll also touch on some more complex things on culture and impact, but let me stick with the invisible elements for now. So this isn't one way to like zoom in a bit into the scorecard that we showed earlier, which is probably too small for many of you to see on your screens. People was one of the main categories, one of the four main categories that structure the scorecard. We can explode the categories a bit further and be a bit more nuanced in what we think makes up the people category. And you'll see the same kind of two subcategories match one category idea across the entire scorecard. So we are specifically interested in the talent pipeline and the mentors that are out there in the ecosystem that are available to entrepreneurs, as well as the champions and ecosystem builders, the Gabes of this world and the Shallys of this world that are actually bringing attention to the needs of entrepreneurs that are in direct contact, that feel the needs, the pains, and the successes first, besides families and close communities, but they're so critical to amplify and to be integrated into kind of conversation around ecosystem strategy. And we circle from people to programs where we look at conversations, on-ramps, and pathways to next one. So it was a beautiful kind of roundabout visualization to networks, and then finally to narratives. And you see the circular kind of connection where narratives, again, affect how mentors come into the play in the ecosystem. So depending on what kind of identity we craft and we hold dear and we nurture, and the stories we tell about our ecosystem, that affects the pipeline of mentors and talent that actually want to come to our ecosystem, that feel as though they have a shot at living the entrepreneurial ambitions that they have, in our case, in this specific place. The same as how does metrics and learning that we embody in our work actually affect the actions of ecosystem builders and champions, many of which are spearheading the learning part and have this as a tacit understanding about what works well or what doesn't work well. So this is a kind of virtuous cycle where we're always going to try to improve individual components and then enter into the next stage again. I talked enough about the scorecard. Now it's up to you, and I strongly encourage you, and I'll put this into the Slack as well for the real link to look at the scorecard. Pull it up, save it on your browser. We're gonna nudge you again after this event. It's just a 10 to 20 minute exercise, depending on I said how much caffeine you have. Like clearly I did not have enough caffeine in my blood today, so I'll be on the 25 minute mark probably for filling it out. But don't feel like you have to have all the answers. So the scorecard allows you to be very deliberate about assessing based on what you know. So you don't have to answer all the questions. There's an ability to say like, I simply don't know. I don't feel equipped to answer a specific question, which helps us actually get more accurate pictures of your perspectives of the ecosystem. We will, once we reach, and I see we've got about 22 attendees outside of the panelists. If we get 25 folks from your ecosystem to take the scorecard, everyone will get disaggregated results back that show the median kind of responses, and we score them for these different categories. And if you hit the 30 mark, we also go to the subcategory level. That can be a great kind of starting point for getting oriented in about the strengths and the areas for growth in your ecosystem. So pull it up again on your tab. Do it this hopefully not while Gabe is talking, because you're going to miss out big time. But after our webinar today, and otherwise we're going to come back and remind you of the importance of doing that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Nick. So I appreciate that we were able to have time to share with you a couple of our frameworks and tools, the Abide framework and our scorecard that can help you begin to think through the work that you're doing locally. And we'll just do another pulse check. Make sure you're awake, you're still with us. Drop in the chat, if you will. What do you think makes the Douglas County ecosystem unique? And we'll go ahead and move forward, but we'd love to hear and sort of reflect on some of your answers later as we go forward. All right, so what does all look like, right? And so what does it look like in community? We've talked about these frameworks, we've talked about this idea of what does equity look like, but in practice, what does it look like in communities? And just real quick time check, Shelley, if you can let me know where we are. That'd be great. Just want to make sure we have time to share this video.
11:50.
Okay. And so how much time total do we have? Sorry. So to make sure I'm not cutting Gabe off.
You're good
No.
till 10.
Okay. All right.
I think that's
We'll go ahead and share this video. This is work that is going on for our eShip Communities program that we shared earlier in partnership with the Kaufman Foundation. And this is our 4 local directors, Gabe, who is one of them, that shares what their work looks like in community and what ecosystem building means to them.
There's enough room for entrepreneurs, and this is the future. An entrepreneurial ecosystem builder is a community organizer for entrepreneurs.
Is a connector. It helps individuals, organizations, and community get connected.
It's about identifying where barriers exist, even unspoken barriers, where things have been just insurmountable, basically, for folks to access resources that do exist in our region.
It's someone who is willing to sit down and have a lot of individual conversations to understand what's happening and to connect and to put things together, right? Both within this individual level, right? Like an individual entrepreneurial level, but also what's happening at the system.
They really have a systems view of things. They're looking at the context to understand the systems that are keeping what's around in place. And so we're really trying to build a new system.
There are so many pockets of our city where entrepreneurial ideas are starting, but not all get the same recognition.
You have population centers, and then you have rural areas surrounding those centers. And if they're not connected, then the flow of resources doesn't really exist necessarily to the people that it needs to reach.
It's something like 85% use their own funds to be able to get their business started. Automatically sets the limit as to what type of businesses and what type of industries that communities of color get into. And so how do we help change that?
You can't really divorce the challenges that we're facing now from the historic challenges of slavery, Jim Crow, the northern migration. How do we shift the conditions that are marginalizing some folks and over-resourcing other folks in order to reorient it so that everybody has access to sustainable community development? Even though we may struggle with similar issues, every community is different and we all need to be able to generate our own solutions.
Fundamental to the mission of eShip Communities is targeting historically underrepresented entrepreneurs and business leaders. You know, what neighborhoods are being left out of our city? Who all in community are being a part of talking about these discussions?
In Baltimore, we're really trying to create a whole new context so that Black entrepreneurs can access everything that white entrepreneurs do, but we're doing it in a way that's culturally anchored and really connected to the way Black people work together.
The neighborhoods that we're working in don't feel supported. And so how do we help these individuals feel that there's a culture and atmosphere in Kansas City where entrepreneurs feel supported and that there's bringing resources really back to those communities?
I think a lot of those barriers can be addressed through cooperative approaches, but that level of organization has yet to be created.
We're trying out some ideas we think might work, and we're saying, what's the chance someone in another town, city, municipality takes everything we learned and paints a picture of how to tailor it for your specific community?
That would be communities like Douglas County. And so grateful to be able to share this with you today. And one of the reasons I asked you to share what's unique about you is one of the things you heard in that video is that every community is unique. We can develop frameworks until the end of time, but when you really get down to it, what each community needs through our scorecard, it determines is different. And that means different solutions. And it's what we're going to talk about now. And we'll talk about eShip Communities. Just real quick to say the work that we've done, that's the first thing we learned when we started to dig into communities is we developed this beautiful framework. Hey, let's do all of this in all these communities. And within literally the first couple of meetings, it was very clear that each of those councils, each of those groups of leaders said, no, we want to focus on something very specific because we are unique and we have unique needs. And so across our eShip communities, we focus on Black entrepreneurship in Baltimore, public-private partnerships in Long Beach, language and cultural barriers in Kansas City, and on food equity and the food sector in Rio Grande. And so with that, I'm actually excited to turn this over to the superstar of this presentation, and that is Gabe, who is our eShip Kansas City local director, and he'll dive in and share about the work that's being done there in your neck of the woods.
Oh, thank you, Faye, for the intro. I'm definitely no superhero. Just a connector.
Superstar,
superstar, or a superhero. So, but no, so I just kind of want to share, how this process has looked like here in Kansas City, how we've gotten started, some of the steps we've taken, and where we're at currently, and share some of the outcomes that we've seen so far through this process. So, really we started simple, bringing some individuals together from different entrepreneur support organizations, community members together, and asking one question, really: how do we link and leverage the assets of the individuals around the table to greater aligned, collaborating impact, to create just a more equitable and inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem? So that was our starting question, to see what do we each of us have that's unique, that each of us can bring, whether it's a skill set, whether it's something tangible, financial, and how do we use those to build something unique. But then, like Faye mentioned, we started to bring more people to the table, and folks were like, well, first we need to start talking to the people that we're trying to help. And so what we ended up doing was we ended up really, instead of trying to take a metro-wide focus, we really wanted to work at the community neighborhood level. And so we ended up identifying 2 neighborhoods that we wanted to do work in. So the first is in Kansas City, Missouri. It is, if you're familiar with the KCMO area, it's predominantly Truce to Prospect, and it'd be Linwood to 43rd Street would be the boundaries of that. Those aren't hard boundaries, but soft. But that's the neighborhood we wanted to focus our efforts in. And then the second neighborhood is in Kansas City, Kansas, and it's predominantly from 5th Street down to 18th Street, and they're including Central and Minnesota Avenue are the 2 major corridors there. And the reason we selected those neighborhoods was because we saw, on the edge of these neighborhoods, there's a lot of new development coming in. There's high risk of gentrification happening. You also saw that there was a high disparity in household income. So these neighborhoods had low income, but the immediate neighborhood right next door had really high income. We also saw that there was major corridors there that could hold and withstand and support some more economic activity in those commercial corridors. So we wanted to see how can we help really support. But what are the barriers folks are running into as they're trying to start or grow their business? So instead of going off based off assumptions, we went door to door, speaking to small business owners first, just as an introduction to get to know the stories of the entrepreneurs, understand what led them to getting their business started. What was it, a passion? Was it a necessity? And just understand them. And so building trust up, and it took time. So we ended up, after a couple different times of going out door to door talking to folks, we ended up doing a survey to better track the information from the entrepreneurs. The survey, we did offer it in English and Spanish. And we ended up having about 77 folks, I believe, that ended up taking that survey. And the survey itself was a little bit difficult. So, folks do surveys quite a bit all the time. These were communities where most individuals had never really participated in a survey. And so these were really interested to really get the feedback from the individuals. And so I remember going, at times where I specifically remember one furniture store on Minnesota Avenue in KCK. While the gentleman was completing the survey, I'm carrying out furniture for their customers. So then that way they don't get distracted. So then that way they can have some time to be able. There's another gentleman with a restaurant who was just a small little restaurant that's just getting started. So he was the server and the waiter. He was also the cook and the bus boy and cashing people out, washing dishes, doing everything. And so I helped him out while that was just because I really wanted to be as flexible as possible to be able to get the input and be able to get folks to complete this survey. So we did that, and then it took a couple of months and we got the results back. And then we held these community listening sessions where we digged into the information from from the survey. And we ended up identifying some 16 key takeaways really from this survey. So then we went back again and really held discussions, small group discussions in regards to these 16 takeaways to identify what are similarities, how do they collide, or how they opposite, why is this happening, or what do we perceive from this data that we're finding in here, and really ended up identifying 5 key barriers that these 16 takeaways really revolved around. And so we dove into those 5 barriers, and each of the communities then selected which of the barriers they wanted to be able to focus on in their communities to come up with some pilot ideas and some projects to be able to help address the barriers. And so in Kansas City, Missouri, the 2 barriers that the communities wanted to focus on in their neighborhood was really around trust and support for small businesses. Most of the entrepreneurs just really intimidated to seek help from organizations. They really felt that there was a lack of trust there. And a lot of that really stemmed from a lot of promises that had always been made for the east side of Kansas City, that for projects and programs to come in, but the businesses felt that they'd never receive any support, or nobody comes in and visits them, nobody comes in and supports them, but there's all these programs out there supposedly, and they've never been able to take advantage of it. So there was this, they felt that there's just, no support there. There's also the cultural competency piece. So a lot of the organizations, staff did not resemble the community. They also, their board of directors didn't, and they felt that the programs really didn't fit with what the goals of the entrepreneurs, and they didn't really understand even sometimes just even like the market that the entrepreneurs are trying to face and the barriers and problems they're trying to solve for their communities. And they felt because of that, they really didn't feel additional support from those organizations. So in KCMO, we ended up creating a couple of different programs, but one of them was a mentorship program, a multicultural mentorship program. So that was that's a screenshot of our second cohort there of the mentorship program that we created. It was initially designed to be one-on-one in face at the place of business, but because of COVID, we had to adapt to Zoom. So we've made that a focus there. So, but then in KCK, the barriers that the community wanted to focus on there was really around language. So Kansas City, Kansas has a growing Hispanic population, and there's a large refugee community as well. And so the entrepreneurs felt that there really are not a lot of resources that they can go to where they can get information in their language. Even though some of the individuals may be able to speak English or limited English proficiency, when it comes to a lot of the technical terms or just information, it's a lot tougher for them to know and understand. And so, I mean, it'd be like somebody who doesn't know computers or software and apps and trying to figure out apps, and you're trying to really understand this technical term. So that was one of the barriers. The other barrier we wanted to solve on there was the lack of awareness of resources. So the majority of small business that we talked to weren't aware of any organizations that provide help and support to their business. So that was one that we really wanted to focus on in that community. For there, and so we created for Kansas City, Kansas, our idea was really just this 3-tier approach of not really creating any new programs, but really how do we make individuals more aware of the existing resources that already exist, and then how do we help get them connected to that. So we did a couple different things together to help break that awareness and the language barrier. And we started off by just going one-on-one engagement with small businesses, going to small businesses, sharing resources that existed for them. And then we came up with this idea of just hosting these multilingual events in the community, right in the heart of the community. So if you're familiar with KCK, there's not a lot of places for you to go. There's actually, until a couple of years ago, there wasn't even a coffee shop for you to go and meet up with an entrepreneur or with another individual to host these connecting networking type meetings in introductions. And so we planned 3 monthly workshops that we did, where the whole purpose was just to highlight and amplify an existing program that existed. In addition to that, we did a mini fair during that workshop and presentation for an opportunity for the different ESOs to be able to connect with the small businesses. And we did and promoted these going one-on-one through the streets, and we promoted them in several different languages. So we did it in English, of course, but we also did Spanish, Burmese, and Nepali. And during the event, we actually offered interpreting services. So we had these different headsets that individuals would put on. And so when somebody came in and registered, depending on what language they needed, we would give them a headset and we would dial it into the language that they needed. So to be able to allow for those informations to be in their native language. We also, some of the things we did with that was we allowed for flexibility in RSVPing. So more than half of the individuals who attended RSVP through text message, and only about 20 to 25% actually RSVP through an Eventbrite that we had sent out. And then the others RSVP'd by giving a phone call predominantly. So yeah. And so what we also wanted to do was provide, we did this one-time workshop or once a month workshop. But we know folks have individual questions or just need help and further support. So we started to provide weekly office hours at the public library, where individuals who learned about programs that just needed more information or needed help with applying and filling out an application, or just had more questions, where they can come in and have and seek assistance there. And so, this is some of the shots of just the process. So we have the shot of the ideas and how we came up with the barriers, and then some of the event shots that we had. For that event, we ended up having about 120 individuals who participated. So And the majority of those individuals were individuals of color, and 60% needed assistance with language, with interpreting services for that event. So we did, just because of COVID, we ended up doing 2 events in person, and then we had to switch online to a virtual Zoom format. And so in total, we've had over 194 individuals participate in the programs that we've been able to help put on. These are not set up and organized by myself. We have a collaborative team of individuals from the community. So we have individuals for like Catholic Charities, the SBDC out of Johnson County, the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, the Hispanic Chamber, the Heartland Black Chamber, Mission Adelante. So it's a very community driven and organized event and program that we've been putting on. And then we have about 15 different, entrepreneur support organizations that have been supporting this work. And they've enjoyed it as well, because they've struggled to sometimes build relationships in the community. And this has been a really great way for them to be able to get in front of the community. Let's see here. But some of the outcomes that we've had through this have been, we've had 65 phone calls assisting small businesses and providing just advice and connections and getting them connected to other resources. We did have, just in the first 2 months of this program, we had 3 small businesses who applied for one of the programs that we had promoted, which was a grant through Wyandotte County. So Wyandotte County's had this grant for a number of years and couldn't get anybody to apply for it. So just to have 3 be able to apply was success, and 2 of them actually ended up getting the grants, which was really great for them, and they were really impressed and surprised that Wyandotte County actually supports business. So there was this feeling and understanding that government doesn't support, and then once they get the information, now they start to change and see that there is support. How do they take advantage of it? So but that, doing that application process, that included me helping somebody with writing an entire business plan, a marketing plan, and putting that all together. So it's a longer process to apply for that grant. It wasn't just a single application form. So it took a lot of hands-on work to helping with those individuals. But we also got individuals to apply for a program through the state of Kansas that anybody can apply for, called an IDA, which stands for Individual Development Account. And that's a assets earning program through the state of Kansas. And basically, for every $1 somebody saves, the state of Kansas will match $2. So they can save up to $3,000. The state of Kansas would then match $6,000, giving an individual $9,000 that they can put into the business to either start or to grow a business. And this is a really great program for individuals who are struggling to be able to save to start their business. Most businesses that we're working with tend to use their own personal savings to start their business. They don't have family and friends to turn to be able to start their business. So this has become a really crucial program. This program's existed for a number of years. And these individuals were actually the very first ones in Wyandotte County to apply for that program. So the program's actually run out of Hutchinson. So as you all may know, Hutchinson is about 3.5 hours away from here. And it's really tough for them to promote that program from there across the entire state. So we've been really working on amplifying and promoting that program. But we've helped, just in that first couple of weeks, we were able to help 3 small businesses get started. We actually saved one individual from using her life savings from starting a business. So she was getting ready to jump into business and sign a contract and realized that this was actually not going to be feasible. And she was gracious just to have had somebody to talk to and learn about some of the obstacles she was going to encounter that she didn't realize. And so, we've helped a couple businesses that from that first event set up their own website. For one of them, it's been life-saving, especially now as COVID hit. We set him up with the Google's page. And now when I go on, I went on there about a month ago, he had over 20 referrals on there, the star ratings on his Google page. And he says Dad's given him more business than anything he's ever done or tried in his year of business. And he was something that he didn't know how to do. It's simple, free to do. And then we also got him set up with a free website as well. That's been important for him. But the Google page, by far, he says, is the most important thing that nobody's ever told him, that he was gracious to have learned through the programming that we put on. And then once COVID hit, of course, we kind of switched to more one-on-one outreach, going back and calling individuals, helping them learn about the different PPP programs and EIDL and the different, even the state Spark program and all those. And so we were able to help 25 small businesses to be able to get grants. So most of these businesses aren't connected to a chamber. They're not connected to other organizations. And most of the times what happens is the organizations usually send out an email blast, or they send out, or they put it out on their social media. And so if these businesses aren't connected on the email blast or on the social media, they're not getting this information. And those are the businesses we're really trying to reach out and helping them get plugged in so they can become aware of these resources. Oh, and here is Virginia Mercado. So Virginia is one of the small businesses that participated in the different programs that we've put on. And so Virginia, she started a small business selling boots, boots that are specifically geared towards restaurant workers and manufacturing. And so she started her first year in sales, she did $12,000. And so she is the sole breadwinner for her household. She has a household of 3. And so it was very difficult for her to live and sustain her business on that kind of income. So she wanted to see how can she help grow her business. And so one of the first things we did was we got her in signed up for the IDA program. So she signed up. She's in the IDA program actually currently right now, doing her savings right now. She's actually the individual who got the grant from Wyandotte County. So that grant was for $10,000, which automatically put a big boost into her business. She's used that now to build out a website. She's been able now to carry an American line of boots. So when you start out with these new boot supplies or whatnot with the new manufacturer distributor, they require a large amount upfront purchase that you have to do. And she never had the funds to be able to do that, even though she had a clientele and business base that kept asking for that product. So, and then from there, she's also now been able to work on her on her branding and appearance out in community, and she's getting ready to bring somebody on board to be employed. And so it was thanks to that though, but she's become an advocate for the eShip communities in Kansas City. She now is very strong at going out and promoting the information to the small businesses, but more importantly, she's actually taking it a step further and actually helping people now apply for that program. And helping them become aware of these new grants. And because we did a lot of handholding with her, with filling out the applications, going through her taxes and paperwork. So, but she's now, and so now you see that ripple effect of her helping one individual and how now she's helping a multitude of other people. And that's kind of what it's all about, building that ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Gabe. So we were able to take it full circle for you guys. Very much like that eShip graphic goes around. The storytelling then leads to now her bringing on more entrepreneurs. So thank you so much for allowing us to share this with you. Just a recap for Forward Cities, this is what we do. We help communities like Douglas County assess, align, and amplify the work in their ecosystems through research and evaluation, convening and design justice, and advocacy and learning. And if you have any questions about our work or would like to find out how we can support you in more ways, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks so much for the invite.
Thank you so much, Faye and Nick and Gabe. That was, I think you nailed it. We had a 30-minute planning call a couple weeks ago, and y'all, you get us. So I think that was a wonderful presentation. And I want to, there's one question that came up in the chat a little earlier, but I do want to throw out all, we have 14 minutes left in our scheduled time, and throw some questions in the chat. But the first one that came from Rich Minder, and he asked, and this was part of when you're at your presentation, Faye, on how does social division of labor and economic structure of regions cause inequities to persist, and he cites division of labor between service versus manufacturing, for example, which I think is a thing here. It is a thing in lots of communities, but it is a thing here too.
Yeah, for sure that this is something that we We see in both Kansas City and we see also in our work in New Mexico, there's no way, I believe, of getting around that. Redlining and some ways that sort of cities have been structured, and just general geographic boundaries can create some of these barriers. And so it's about being aware of this and understanding how you're not going to necessarily be able to meet the needs of every community with the same types of programming or ecosystem support. And so it really looks like having multiple ecosystems that you need to, that have each of their own unique needs, and then you begin to build the bridges between them and connect the dots so that they're helping and supporting one another. And so there's people, bridge spanners, that can float between ecosystems and between areas and neighborhoods.
And I think therein lies the challenge, is for, our existing players in this work, whether it's, Ryan's organization or mine or the city, we have a really important role to play in that. And we put a lot of our ducks into one ecosystem. We put one or two ecosystems, and we aren't being intentional. That word really struck with me, intentional, about looking for what other ecosystems are there, opportunities and connections that we need to make.
And how do you weave them together, right?
Yeah.
So if you are at the city or county level, one of the things that's part of your role is to bring the different partners to the table that represent these different ecosystems, and be able to work together to understand where are the strengths, where are the gaps, where are they duplicating services, where can they work together, and then you create a common vision that encompasses all the parts, so that you can all move forward together towards one sort of North Star, and that is the role of city and county level ecosystem building.
Gabe, I think I asked you this when we first talked, but what is the funding from the unified government that has been a tool for the examples that you gave? And maybe for Faye and Nick too, what around the country and the different projects that you're working in, where are you seeing local governments, whether it's city or county, play an interesting role and maybe a non-traditional role?
Yeah, so definitely WICO is trying to change as to how they support, especially local businesses. So, they've launched the WICO Loves Local campaign that's based around highlighting and promoting Wyandotte businesses, and encouraging community support of those businesses, especially during COVID. But they, a couple of years ago, launched a grant program. Now, the grant's not huge in any manner, but it's $25,000 that they've set aside. But now what we're, working with the e-communities group in Wyandotte, one of the things we're looking to see is how can we use that as matching funds from the funds from Network Kansas, and exploring how can that be done, and can we then leverage that with funds from other organizations to be able to grow a pot, because we do have the I was going to call it revolving loan. It's not the revolving loan, the gap fund through Network Kansas, but a lot of the small businesses that we're working in are already hesitant to take out loans, and so they're not even at that point where they're needing that gap piece. So the funds have been kind of sitting there, and we're working on figuring that out. But one thing we've noticed is that if Wyandotte County already has this grant, how come we can't combine that in to match and create a matching fund grant through Network Kansas? So that's kind of what we're exploring right now through the e-communities.
And we also realize, sorry.
No, I was just going to jump in and say one other thing that we see is really important is that, as we said earlier, I see we have someone on from Heather with us from the Douglas County Community Foundation. We see that community foundations are actually right for catalyzing investment in this work. And so if they can be the first money at the table, often it will de-risk funding for city and county government and for impact investors, because they have the ability to feed it in a unique way that the organizations don't necessarily have to keep coming back for repeated grants, because an endowment can create a sustainable and long-term sort of funding source for the ecosystem level work. And so we're excited about leaning into community foundations and private foundations as catalytic investment for entrepreneurial ecosystems.
Just to add one thought, and actually comes from a great kind of pilot run in Kansas City as well that Gabe oversaw. I think even chambers or economic development authorities in different communities that are tasked with distributing or partake in the distribution of government relief funds have an opportunity to see that as a incredibly important entryway into engaging with entrepreneurs over the long run. I've spoken to a lot of people over the last couple of months that just try to get the money out the door. They're already understaffed, and the biggest kind of metric for their own success is like how much money they push out the door. And for the sake of entrepreneurs, that's probably well-aligned incentives, assuming that what they push out the door actually gets to folks that need it most, but that's probably not in their hands most of the time. But it also leads to a understandable short-sightedness where someone might receive PPP dollars or idle dollars, but that's it. There's no kind of connectivity to seeing the entrepreneur, like accompanying the entrepreneur on their journey after they have absorbed the money, and to have an active interest in making sure that the entrepreneur uses that, besides paying for their own debt and their own kind of charges that they have accrued over the time and weren't able to pay, to actually become a stronger business owner themselves. So can we use that touch point that chambers, for instance, have with entrepreneurs to establish a relationship where we can then feed in ecosystem builders and other resource providers locally to wrap around them and make sure that they have all the support they need in order to potentially maximize like the remaining dollars that are still in their pockets after they paid for all the things they had to pay for.
Definitely, and we do have a history of chamber support for our work as well. In Indianapolis, the Indy Chamber was one of our funding partners related to our ecosystem work there as well. So definitely, we see that level of organization recognizing the need to sort of lean in this direction.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned one of the things that I noted on either one of Faye or Gabe's or Nick's slides, and Nick just brought it up, you know, the funding coming out of COVID, and how have we used COVID to evaluate and take advantage of it, see it as an opportunity to just get involved. And right now, you know, we've been doing some really good work within our unified command structure of how we respond to COVID-19. But in here is an economic impacts branch. And we've been doing that work since March. So there's been an intentional effort around that. But I still think, though, that there's invisible layers. That's a lot of it's visible. And frankly, a lot of the participation in that have been from folks that have the ability to participate and to be squeaky wheels. So restaurants, service industry, it's a huge part of this community and our economic engine. But there's other folks as well, and so there's that. But right now we have a great opportunity with the Community Development Block Grant that the City of Lawrence is uniquely qualified to receive, and it's a 3-year grant. It's $500,000, and you know, we've got a proposal from some folks that a group within this structure that is our equity impact advisors, and they're talking about doing the sort of things that Gabe did as part of his work in eShip. And so that's what really is resonating with me about this conversation today, and using COVID as a catalyst. Ryan and I were talking about this stuff early on, and Ryan started in his work as at the chamber shortly after we went on lockdown in March, I think, right, Ryan?
Yeah, March 17th.
You also can't underestimate, I know we're sort of winding down here, but I did see at least one or two folks, I think, from the library system on the call as well. And I just want to give that a shout out, because you can't underestimate, like we were talking about earlier, all of the different other pockets of support that lend themselves to entrepreneurship. And so Gabe talked about us hosting one-on-ones at libraries. Forward Cities is digging in some work with the Urban Library Council, about what does this look like for libraries to be anchor institutions related to supporting entrepreneurship. And yes, they're struggling a little bit now because of the pandemic, but they are very well positioned because of the free opportunities and services that they offer, but also because of their placement in neighborhoods often. To be fantastic catalysts for supporting entrepreneurs. And I'm very excited about Nick's building that partnership and digging into that. So for those library folks on the call, we see you, and we love your support of entrepreneurship as well.
We have an outstanding library we have 3 libraries, but they're separate systems in each parts of the county, which my observation only is we have a lot of inequities in terms of access to the Lawrence Library is amazing. They do a wonderful job here in the city of Lawrence, but there's also just one branch. And there's a teeny one in Eudora that's trying to grow a capital campaign and just be open regular hours. And there's a larger one in Baldwin that is doing a great job as well. But I come from communities that have a really extensive network and that's a taxpayer investment. So that's when you think about what are these infrastructure level systemic investments, a tax impact is important to folks' pocketbooks though, but so we have to be mindful of that. But I love libraries, and I think they play a huge role in this, and it's an asset for us. But I want to keep us on time and thank everybody that's participated in our panelists. So much gratitude for you all. I'm so grateful for the relationship with Network Kansas, which allowed me to get to know you all and have access to you all as a resource. So I count that as an asset as well. I'm thankful to the folks that were able to join us today, and I am going to share this out, a recording of this, and capture the chat. And Ryan, any parting words from you, or Shelley?
I think this is definitely, we talk about our ecosystem, and I know it has character, right? And so this is a component of that, and it's a piece of the puzzle as we continue to work towards trying to encourage every individual in our community who has an interest to have the resources to take the next step in the conversation, regardless of where they're starting out at. So I'm hopeful. As I said, that sort of jumped on a moving train. A lot of good things already happening, and glad to be a part of the team, and glad we continue to make progress towards that. And Faye and Nick and Gabe, can't tell you how much I appreciate you all being with us today and letting us ask you questions and hearing your expertise, and look forward to future conversations, future learning.
Thank you so much for having us.
Don't forget the scorecard. Let me pull this up again.
I was just going to say that as well. Don't forget the scorecard.
Yes.
No, that's my biggest follow-up tool for this is like, how do we get going? Like, how do we assess? Yeah, thank you. That's
awesome.
Huge. Thank you.
This has been a great experience. I appreciate it. I'm glad I could be a connector for everybody. So it's certainly, all of this lies in empowering the community, specifically, the citizens that are here in Douglas County. So we are fortunate, and it was a great turnout, and we appreciate it very, very much. You guys did a lovely job. Lovely job.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Love being with you. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, you too. Stay safe, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.